Welcome to Divorced Muslims, A Second Chance, the podcast that uplifts voices for both divorced and single Muslims. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah amma ba'd. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu to all our viewers, and welcome to another episode in season 3 of our podcast titled Divorced Muslims, A Second Chance. In this episode, we are joined by Sister Asiya, who is from the West Midlands, also a single mother. So without further ado, Sister Asiya, assalamu alaikum, and welcome to our show. Introduce yourself.
Wa alaikum assalam. I'm Asiya from the West Midlands.
Okay, thank you, Asiya. I guess a good starting point would be to ask you, how long ago was your divorce?
So I got divorced in 2023.
Okay, so it's been roughly about 3 years.
Yeah.
And how long were you married for?
Not very long. So I got married in 2019.
Okay.
So
You say not
just
very
on.
long. You say that, but 4 years is a long time. It's a World Cup time, man.
So I got married in 2019, but I'd obviously left the marital home in 2021. I took a bit of time before I took that decision for a Khula. Hence, obviously, that's why the divorce came through in 2023.
Okay, we'll come to that in a few moments, inshallah. How did you come across your ex-partner?
So we went to the same secondary school, but reconnected a few years after we'd left.
Okay. Right. So let's go into your story. Tell us about your marriage and your divorce story. Tell us what happened.
So, like I previously said, married in 2019. I had my first child in 2020. I think that did put a lot of strain on the marriage because a lot of my time was taken up with my daughter. Shortly after that, fell pregnant with my second child. During the pregnancy, I found out from a third party that infidelity. But the marriage was very rocky. It just felt like I was in the marriage on my own. I felt like I was a married single mom. I had support of my family, but I'd taken that decision to marry this person. So I did feel like I had a lot of pressure to stay in the marriage and make it work, considering we hadn't been obviously together for very long. I don't think we communicated very well. I think we had very different upbringings. We had very different morals. We were on very different levels of deen. So I think all of that played a part, obviously his behaviors as well. So yeah, that's pretty much long story short.
Okay. In hindsight, when you look back, do you think you could see red flags in the beginning before you married your ex-partner?
I wouldn't say so because we didn't really spend much time together. It was only after we got married. So there's a saying, you don't know somebody until you live with them. I think just a lot of things got revealed, and by that time we were married. I don't think we were compatible.
Yeah.
We just had very different worldviews. We had very different religious views, and I think it was just very combative.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned earlier that you got married in 2019. You left the marital home. I'm assuming you lived with in-laws.
Yeah.
You left the marital home in 2021, and then your divorce occurred in 2023. And you mentioned Khula. So, what happened in those 2 years? Is that something that were you thinking about, perhaps working on the marriage, or why 2 years?
So when I left, I was in the mindset. I was 8 months pregnant with my second child. So my mindset then was, I'm not going back. I can't do this anymore. I can't put up with what I've had to put up with. I don't have peace. And that was the main thing. I didn't have peace. I didn't feel like I could carry on. I was just mentally, emotionally, every way possible. I wasn't me. I was a very different person from person I was back then and to obviously who I am today. So after obviously having given birth to my second child, boy, um, I felt like I had a lot of interference from now my ex-in-laws. Things were said to me, and it made me think that I have to stay in this marriage for the sake of the children. Also, I didn't want to make a decision in haste. Obviously, I contacted the mosque, explained the situation, and what they advised me was, because I was pregnant at the time, to wait until I'd given birth and then take the decision then. I think just a lot happened in the 2 years where I saw that my ex-husband was saying things like, sorry, I'm sorry I hurt you, like all the things that maybe I wanted to hear before, but it wasn't, I felt like it wasn't genuine because the actions didn't match the words. And then something was said to me. I do not really want to state what was said, which made me realize that, do you know what, this person isn't actually sorry. And that's when I decided that I'm going to take the step and go to the masjid and apply for a khula. And I did that in Ramadan of 2023.
Okay. Am I correct in understanding then your ex-partner wasn't interested in actually giving you a divorce, which is why you took the khula route?
Yes, so I did request from him to give that, and his words were, I will never give you a divorce. You can do what you want. I don't care what you do. I'm not giving you a divorce. So after giving birth, your hormones are all over the place. So it didn't make sense to me why he would say that, considering what he was doing at the time. Infidelity was the grounds for the divorce to be issued. So that obviously was continuing. So I couldn't make sense of, if you're doing this, why are you not setting me free? It's only when I stepped out of the situation I realized maybe it was a control thing. Maybe it was the fact that you can't do anything or you can't go anywhere until obviously me as a male has given you that talaq. And obviously a khula process is very long. It takes up to 6 months and that's minimum. So I can't speak on obviously what he was thinking at the time, but this is what I take from the situation. I don't think he genuinely wanted me back in the family house. I just think it was, she's the mother of my children. And I know that's a big thing because our children are important to us. But I wasn't only that, I was also a wife. I wasn't treated like a wife.
Okay. Out of curiosity, what was your experience of the whole, you know, khula process?
I had a really good experience of it. I mean, I'm saying good. I know it's not a good thing, but it was the right thing. So I obviously attended the masjid. I had to fill in an application, had to obviously pay the fees, and then they advise you that it can take up to 6 months. So I don't know how obviously other mosques work, but they basically send a letter to the other party. So they sent 3 letters and they got no response for each letter. And then obviously I got called in for a date in September, I believe, if I can recall correctly. So I wasn't aware that they'd also called him and he'd actually attended, because there was no communication other than regarding the children. And one morning I wake up to like a message of him asking me if I'm okay. And this was the date that I was supposed to go to the masjid. So I got a bit confused because I thought, has something happened to the children? Or why is he messaging me? I didn't respond. I went to the mosque, and that's when obviously they told me that he's been in and we've spoken to him. And he basically left a statement. They obviously had to read the statement. I did request they not read it, but they said they have to, like, I don't know if it's like a Sharia council rule, or they had to read the statement. And then it was very emotional because in the statement, he did acknowledge he was truthful in everything that he did. And he stipulated like rules of what he expected me to do moving forward and what he would do. And I was asked by the Sharia council, like, what do you want to do? And I said, I just want you to dissolve this marriage. They asked me how sure I was, said 100%. And that was it. The marriage was dissolved then and there.
Yeah. Um, I mean, A tough question to ask. What impact has divorce had on you? And just to, put it out there, you've been divorced now for, round about, well, just over 2 years, coming up to 3 years. How would you answer that?
At the time, it felt like it was the end of the world, but now I think it's made me a lot stronger. I'm very emotionally resilient now, which is an attribute I never had before. But it's made me extremely wary of people. My outlook on life has changed. I do believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put me in the position for a reason. He was meant to be the father of my children. And yeah, I don't think I had a negative experience. I haven't experienced any negativity other than like belonging to South Asian families. I did get the you should have gave a chance, you should have gave it time. And I think 2 years is quite a long time to take to make come to that decision. And I'm glad that I took the time out and I didn't make a rash decision and I made an informed decision and I made a decision where I was in my senses, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You know what? Usually I'd ask the next question, but given the reasons that you have provided as to why the marriage has ended, I feel a little bit uncomfortable asking the question. I'll ask it for the sake of completion, but then I'll leave it for you to answer. And that question is, do you think you made any mistakes in your marriage?
I think it would be unfair to put all the blame onto one person. So it takes two people to run a marriage, right? I think obviously the reason for the divorce was my reaction to other person's actions, right? But I think in hindsight, I do think I had expectations of a husband, but I didn't, how do I word this? I had expectations for him, but I didn't push him to fulfill those expectations. So I think I just used to keep quiet for the sake of the peace. Another thing was I stayed quiet when I should have spoke up, and I spoke up when I should have stayed quiet. Now I say that because I was in a household with approximately 12 to 14 other people, and I wasn't used to that. It wasn't an environment I was comfortable with. I wear hijab, so it wasn't something that obviously I was used to being around so many people. And I think I bottle things up and I let it get so big that sometimes it just would all come out in one go. And I'd look like a complete psycho. But it made sense in my head why I'm reacting the way I'm reacting. But I understand now to other people that those reactions might have been not been justified. So I hope that answers the question.
It does, it does. That leads me on to my next question. Although my understanding is, correct me if I'm wrong, since your divorce, you haven't looked for marriage, is that correct?
No, I haven't yet.
Okay. My next question is, how does one bounce back from being divorced? How would you answer that?
I took a lot of comfort from faith, from my deen, and I think my children. If it wasn't for my children, I think I would have been in a very, very dark place. I had a realization during my second pregnancy. So I had a scan, had an appointment. I was in a high risk pregnancy. And at that time, I would say I was very depressed. And it was something one of the nurses said to me after she did the scan. She said, "You're starving and your baby is starving." Sorry. So because it was so emotionally tough, I wasn't eating and I couldn't comprehend that I was the fuel for obviously my baby to survive. And I think that was the moment that hit me that you're a mom and you're responsible for two little human beings that haven't asked for this and they don't deserve it. So I think after that, I really put everything into my kids and being a mom and making sure they were safe in safe environments. Like Allahumma barik. If it wasn't for the children, I think I would have been in a very, very different position.
Yeah. In terms of sort of going forward, looking for marriage again, is that something that you've thought about?
I didn't think about it up until maybe late last year because everyone deserves companionship. in the halal sense in terms of marriage, right? So my mindset was always, I can't paint every man with the same brush. Just because I've been through one negative experience, why should I just give up? Another thing, obviously, is when I take my children out and they see children with both parents, I know that they won't have that because it's not going to be their dad. But I would really like that, just a family, like the traditional family where there's two parents and there's children. And I hope the same for obviously their dad to do that too, so they get the twice amount of love.
Yeah. Talking of children, then, when you do look for marriage, um, what do you think it's like? Like, and I appreciate you're not there yet, but being a single mother and looking for marriage, like, what are you sort of thinking around that?
I haven't really given it too much thought, but if I was to take the step where I'm in the place looking for marriage, I would always be open and honest that I appreciate as a wife I would have responsibilities that I have to uphold, but they would also need to understand that I have children and they would come, they're like my priority, especially given their age. They're very young at the minute. They're going to need my time, my attention. So me saying that, I would probably look for maybe a, a person that has previously also been married and divorced or widowed, or someone that has children so they understand, maybe appreciate it more that I need to put my children first.
Yeah. Okay. Do you see yourself looking for marriage in 2026?
Inshallah.
Okay, inshallah, may Allah make you find your husband whenever the time is right. I mean,
Ameen.
okay. Do you think when you look back in terms of your criteria, and I appreciate, we haven't spoken about what your mindset would have been when you were looking for marriage or got married the first time around. Do you think your criteria would be different now compared to back then, or is your mindset different now that you're a single mother of two and previously been married, or do you reckon it's the same?
No, I think it would be different if I was looking for marriage now. I think everybody says they want someone on deen, right? But what does that really mean to them? To me, it would mean have good character, obviously praying their salah, because I always say this, that if you can't be loyal to your Lord, you will not be loyal to me. And I don't mean loyalty in the sense of like infidelity or things like that, just loyalty in a marriage where I know I can rely on you. Marriage is hard. You go through hardships, you go through ups and downs, and just have that partnership, that communication. And the most important thing is I would want a man that knows how to be a leader, because I've been a single mom for so long. I've had to put myself in a position where I've got that masculine energy and I don't want it. Whether in an environment that we live in, you have to toughen yourself up, especially when you're a mother and you're on your own. And I don't want to be in that energy. I want to be able to be feminine and know that I can rely on my spouse and he's going to take care of everything that he needs to take care of, and I can do my duties and he can do his duties.
Okay. My next question is, why do you think people are finding it difficult to get married today, divorced or not?
Honestly, I think people have unrealistic expectations. I know preference is one thing, but expectations is another. I think if you've got a set preference, like you've got a list and you're very adamant on that list, I'm not saying you should settle, nobody should settle. But if you can see that you're struggling to find this said person, I think if you've got a list of 10 things that you want to be ticked, and those 8 things are being ticked and there's 2 things that are not being ticked, I think people should maybe reconsider um how important those 2 things are. Obviously it's very subjective for every person, um but I think it is very rare that you will meet someone that ticks all 10 boxes. I'm not saying it's impossible, it does happen, but given the era that we're in, and there's a lot of people that are struggling to find a spouse, it's something to be considered.
Yeah. Okay. And so you talked about unrealistic expectations. What's the difference between having standards and having unrealistic expectations?
Oh, that's a question that is. I think unrealistic expectations in the word, right? They're unrealistic. So for me personally, in my situation, I'm divorced. I have two children and I'm not getting any younger. So I can have the expectation that I want to marry someone in their mid 20s, late 20s. They've never been married. They've never had a relationship with the opposite gender. Is that realistic? Maybe not. Can it happen? It might happen. But that's how I would explain the unrealistic expectation side of it. And standards, everybody has standards, right? They're subjective again. But I don't think you can compare the two because standards, I suppose, relate to your morals. There's something that you can't let go of, I suppose. But expectations are something you can maybe tweak and adjust to.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about apps, marriage apps. Do you think they have improved or damaged the marriage search?
I've never personally used apps, but from what I've heard of other people's experiences, I think they are very damaging because from sisters I've heard that they've matched with obviously brothers and they've later found out that they're married or they're looking for a second wife, which look isn't a problem. If someone's looking for a second wife, that's their decision. But I think they need to be open and honest about it from the get-go, not something that you disclosed later down the line. And I think it's just become a place where people go to where they're bored. This is obviously what I'm hearing from other people, and I can only obviously respect their views because they're the ones that have gone through it. I do think the traditional way works better as where you go through like family or you go through people you know, or I wouldn't even say like rishta aunties because at least people you know or families who introduce you to other people, they know who the people are, they know their families, they know whether these two families can come together. Whereas a Rishta auntie doesn't really know you. She's only going to know what information you provide and what information the other person provides, and you've got to go off face value. There's no way off there's no way of anybody doing any kind of validity or reliability checks. Nobody can do that. Not the apps, not a person. Um, so sometimes it just comes down to real face-to-face interactions rather than using a phone and swiping left and right. I don't think that works.
Okay. I'm going to put down an argument and I just want to know your thoughts on that argument. So many people argue that subconsciously, most British Muslims don't actually want marriage. They want the benefits of marriage without responsibility. They want companionship but not commitment. Marriage has become optional, not a priority. What's your thoughts on this?
I agree to a certain extent. I wouldn't say most. If I go back to my previous marriage, I saw the same thing. I felt like my ex-husband wanted to be married, but he also wanted to lead that quote unquote single man lifestyle. Um, so only speaking from that experience, I can see where this argument has come from. I think marriage has become a lot more complicated now than it was when our parents were married or our grandparents were married. I think now there's so much expectations, especially with all this 50-50 um, business. And I think women don't want to do their traditional roles and men don't want to do their traditional roles. And I think that's where the problem lies.
Okay, another argument I'll put forward and get your views on it is that many people would say the British Muslim marriage crisis is self inflicted. This could be based on unrealistic standards, which you've already spoken about, fear of divorce, image obsession. What's your thoughts around this?
I don't agree. I don't think it's self-inflicted. And I don't think it's just the Muslim community that are struggling to get married. I know of non-Muslims who are also struggling to find a spouse within obviously the South Asian community. Obviously, marriage is a form of rizq. So if Allah has written it for you, it will come to you. And I think a lot of people put so much pressure on themselves to get married by a certain age. And I think that's when they do settle, or they do like just go into the marriage because they get in. I've heard this, and I don't agree with it, but it's the quote unquote past their sell by date. I've heard so many women say this, and I think it's very wrong for them to think of them that way. But obviously, society has made them feel like that they should be married at a certain age. And that's why they do end up just getting married to somebody that they don't really see a future with. But I wouldn't say it's self-inflicted. Maybe in some instances it is, but I can't say that it's for everybody.
Okay. Let's talk about parents or family involvement in the marriage search. Is their involvement a part of, would you categorize that as advice or would you categorize that as control? Like the question I'm asking, when is it advice or when is it control? Where do you draw that line?
Okay, so first, I think it depends on the family dynamics. I think when it comes to women, I personally think it's very important to get your father's advice and an opinion on a potential spouse. Nobody's gonna want better for you than your own father. And I appreciate and I understand not many sisters have that kind of relationship with their dads, or they may not have a father figure. But men know men, like women know women. I think it becomes controlling when it's something that's forced upon you. They can obviously offer their advice, they can give you their opinion, but then for you as a person, it's then for you to decide what you do with that advice and what opinions you take on board. But I do think it's very important to have family involvement from the start, especially like I said, for a sister to have her wali involved. Because I do think when either your brother or your father or your uncle, in some instances your granddad, when they're involved, the man isn't going to basically take the mick because he knows you've got people around you. And I think it's a form of protection as well. Like, it weeds out the people that are just gonna mess around and waste your time.
Yeah. Okay. An experience that I came across recently is where somebody said, I was good enough to talk to, but not good enough to marry. And from that, an inference that we drew from that was that there seems to be a pattern where there's long conversations between parties in the marriage search, deep emotional sharing. But when the marriage talks become real, the connection ends. And the argument from there is that some people use the marriage search for validation and not actual intention for marriage. And what they're looking for is emotional intimacy, but without commitment.
I think this is where that whole involvement of the wali comes in handy. I don't really agree to having conversation outside of a third party being present. I think sometimes people get too comfortable in the quote unquote talking stage, or they are talking for way longer than they should be. I appreciate, look, you've got to get to know the person that you're potentially marrying. But then where do you draw the line? How long do you need to be talking for until those marriage conversations start? I think that the idea of marriage should be there from the beginning. If you're getting to know someone for marriage, that should be put on the table at the start. I'm getting to know you for the purpose of marriage. As a Muslim, I think you should know what you're looking for. If you want to write these questions down in your phone on a piece of paper, you ask these questions. Once the questions are asked and you've got your answers, then you decide, is this a person that I want to marry? And if it is, that's when you involve the family. And I think that's where people get themselves stuck, because they don't want to involve their families until they know every single thing about a person. And respectfully, you're not going to know that person 100%. Even when you're married to them, I don't think you know them 100%. You can never know somebody fully. I don't think that's possible.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think there's a stigma attached around being divorced? And I appreciate you haven't looked for marriage since you've been divorced. Sometimes divorced brothers and sisters say that as soon as they mention that they are divorced, interest in them like drops sharply. They think about delaying disclosure of the fact that they're divorced just to be seen as a person first. So it's like they have to balance between honesty and then self-protection basically to get married. What's your thoughts around this?
There's definitely a stigma. I think I can't obviously speak on brothers' experiences, but I've seen firsthand sisters get approached at like marriage events, and as soon as they mention that they're divorced, the person's like, I'm not interested. They haven't asked any other questions. It's just knowing that this person's divorced. Another thing I think is sometimes it's not the brother or the sister, it's their parents. So their parents will be like, I don't want my son marrying somebody that's been previously married, or I don't want my daughter marrying someone that's been previously married. And obviously, Islamically, there's nothing wrong in that. I think it's a cultural thing, and it's when culture takes precedence before religion. And I've seen it happen to sisters. They're really, really good sisters. They've got they've got the knowledge of being, but they just rejected based off they divorced or because they divorced and they've got children. And it's always a question that's asked is, well, she must have done something wrong. That's why her husband divorced her. And like I said, obviously, I'm not gonna um, belittle a man's experience of divorce, but I can't speak on that because I don't know any brothers that have been divorced to be able to share that. Maybe they get the same response as what women do. But that's one thing. It's the blame. Even done nothing to advocate for the divorce, she must have done something. That's why, or she must have been really bad for her husband to divorce her. And then when you get painted with that brush, then no mother is really gonna want her son to marry someone that's got that basically reputation attached to her, even though it's not who she is.
Yeah. Let's talk about fear-based marriages. Is fear a valid reason to marry? For example, a common statement made in the marriage search is options get worse after 30. What do you think? Is fear a valid reason to marry?
No, definitely not. Because you're fearing that you're getting older and then you're going to put yourself in a situation where you've married a person, you might not even be compatible, and you've just married them for the sake of, I don't want to get to an age where people might not consider me, because then you're thinking of the what ifs. Because if we think of it that way, what's to say that you're not going to end up in a divorce? And I've always said this. I've spoken to mothers who are pressurizing their daughters to marry anybody. They like just find someone and get married. And I've said, would you rather have your daughter 30 plus and single, never married, or for her to be 30 plus and return home divorced and emotionally in turmoil?
Yeah. And you touched upon this before. Why do you think a man who's divorced is often seen as experienced, but a divorced woman is seen as baggage?
I think it's because I'm not saying it happens all the time, but generally, if the woman's got children, the custody obviously will remain with the mother. I don't agree with considering children as baggage. I think that's a horrible thing to say to a woman. But the unfortunate thing is that's how society views them, and I've had to face the same thing said to me. But I think with brothers, especially if they've got children, they have, when I say custody, I mean like the children are not residing with them. So they have the time, they have the finances to take on another marriage, and it's not going to affect that marriage as much as, say, a woman who has her children residing with her decides to remarry. It does affect, I do think it affects the marriage in the sense that they have a lot of obstacles to cross depending on the children's ages, and society talks, and people just, I think it's just pressure from society, and people just don't want to hear it. So
Okay.
they think getting married for the sake of getting married is the right thing to do.
Okay. Green flags are more important than red flags. Agree or disagree?
I think it depends, because a red flag to you might not be a red flag to somebody else. It's very subjective. Like protective jealousy in a man. for a lot of women may seem like a red flag, but for other women that may seem like a green flag. So I think it really depends on how you view what those red flags and what those green flags are.
Okay. And given that we're in the marriage crisis right now, people are finding it difficult to find a spouse. What do you think the solutions are?
Oh, goodness. I think if we knew the answers, everybody would be married, right?
True.
Honestly, uh, what is the solution? I say,
What advice would you give to someone looking for marriage?
have faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that whatever is meant to you will come to you. And if marriage isn't meant to be for you, then it's not going to happen. As much you can strive for it, you can push for it. And the most powerful thing that you can do is make dua. If it's something that your heart desires and you really, really want it, then what have we been advised? You wake up for tahajjud, you make those du'as, and Allah will not make those du'as go unheard.
Yeah. Okay. That's the end of my questions. But we're going to play 2 games.
Okay.
The first game is called the red light, green light game. So we're going to play red light, green light. You have an option of amber as well if you want. I'm going to read out a scenario and you're going to tell me what flag it is, red, amber, or green. Potential says they're not really into talking about emotions.
I'd say red because communication is a really big part of marriage.
Okay. Potential says they want to involve families early, but at a slow pace.
I'd say green because they've said they want to involve families early, but the slow pace thing, that's what's thrown me off there.
Okay. Potential says they have a very detailed marriage criteria.
Green because they know what they want.
Someone who doesn't have a job, but has good deen.
Green.
Someone on the deen, but has a previous criminal conviction.
I would say red because it would depend on what that conviction was.
Okay. Someone with a social media page with many opposite gender followers.
Red. I don't agree with that.
Someone who doesn't talk to his family.
I'd say amber because it depends on what the circumstances are behind that.
Okay, well done. And we go to our classic rapid fire round. Once you're married, where would you take your spouse out to eat on a first date?
I would rather cook at home.
What's the best age to get married?
I'd say late 20s,
What percentage of British Muslims looking for marriage are serious about marriage?
80%.
If your spouse says to you that they want you off social media, what would be your response?
I'd be happy to do that as long as they're respectful as well.
How long should one get to know a potential before making the decision to marry them?
This is very subjective. I'd say about 3 months.
What method is the best or the most effective to find a spouse? Apps, marriage events, matchmakers, matrimonial websites, marriage bureaus.
Can I put another one in there?
Go on.
Is marriage bureaus from the mosque, right?
It could be, yeah.
Yeah, I think through the mosque.
Okay. Would you sign a prenuptial agreement?
Yeah, but they're not valid in the UK, so it wouldn't really make much of a difference.
Interesting. Okay, mental health or physical health?
Mental.
What do you think it takes to be in a marriage that lasts forever?
Respect and positive communication.
If there was a book written on you, what would be the title of the book? Okay.
Resilience.
What do British Muslims say privately but hesitate to admit publicly?
I think this is more so for the brothers. It's when they've gone through like a bad experience in the marriage search. They don't speak about how much it's actually affected them. Openly, I don't think they do that. Maybe in private, like amongst people that are trusted, they do. But I think that's something that could help other brothers in a similar situation and know that they're not the only ones that are going through this and these struggles.
Right. Thank you very much, Sister Asiya. Jazakumullah khair for being a guest on our podcast.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
If you want to be a guest on this podcast or if you want to contact us, then please email us. Our email address is divorcedmuslims@gmail.com.